Hello everyone, hello. Look there, it's another new module. I can't be stopped. I shan't be stopped. This time it is Mutable Instruments Branches, a dual Bernoulli gate. The first time I saw this module and I read what it does, I didn't understand the usefulness of it. But now I do. It takes a trigger or a gate input, and these can be audio frequency, so like a square wave. But it takes a trigger or a gate in the input, and then every time that pulse comes in, it decides by random chance which of the two outputs to send it to. And this knob will affect the probability in favor of one or the other. This can also be controlled with CV to manipulate the probability. The top input is normal to the bottom input, so you can send it one clock, for example, and get 4 random variations out of it, which is what I'm doing right now. Oh yes, I also bought a couple of these things because although I can make a passive mult, the one I build is significantly bulkier and less convenient than this thing. So, and actually, the price of these, if you get a multi-pack, it's just as cheap to buy them as it would be to try and build them. So, there you go. I'm using one right here to split that clock. I could have just used 3 outputs of the QCD, but I wanted to try this out. So I'm splitting one of those clocks, and it is going 3 places. One of those places is into Branches. Another one of those places is into Dresno, and the other place is into the second input of Basta Little Nerd, and I'll get to that in a moment. But first, the rhythm that we are listening to is Branches. One of the outputs from the top is going into T-Kick. The 2 outputs from the bottom are going into open and closed of Hat. And then the remaining output is going into input 1 of Little Nerd to break it up a little further, and then a Euclidean pattern based on that is triggering plats in snare drum mode, and that's all of this. Now I can make T-Kick fire more often by turning that knob over in the direction of the output that's feeding T-Kick. And I can make the snare drum fire a little more often by nudging that knob over in the direction of the snare. But I didn't want the snare hitting every time. I tried that at first and it sounded really monotonous. So that's why it's going through Little Nerd. If you listen to Hat is firing on every beat, but it's flopping back and forth randomly between the open and closed sounds. Now then, there's an LFO being used as the signal for Dresno, and that same clock is clocking Dresno. 3 of its outputs are controlling the tonic sequencer, and the CV from that sequencer is controlling the volts per octave of the dual parallel oscillator, and I'm using both channels, and they are being gated. Well, they're going through skis, and the two channels of skis are receiving triggers also from Dresno. And the dual oscillators are a little bit detuned from each other so that there's slightly more note variation than there would be from just this sequence by itself. And when they fire together, you get a fifth, a nice little chord there. And the last thing that's happening, this is the flip. This channel of Little Nerd is set to flip-flop, and it's receiving a 50-50 probability mix of the clock coming in on input 2 and the randomly distributed beats coming in on input 1. So that trigger is triggering the envelope of life forms, and oscillator 1 is receiving another copy of pitch CV from Tonic, and it's sounding like this. And the VCA is open, as you'll notice whenever that light is on. This is triggering the envelope. And the envelope is kicking the filter open slightly. It's hard to detect unless I turn up the resonance. But there you go. Branches. Since I have recently become more interested in randomly slicing and shuffling up some of these clocks and these rhythms to get more interesting variations and unpredictable patterns. Hope you've enjoyed it at least 50% as much as I have. And thanks to my patrons, because, you know, they paid for that, really. So thanks, you guys, and I'll catch you next time.